Hey everyone, Melting Man 234 here with another Archie Sonic review. Today we'll be looking at issue 13 that was released in August of 1994. And it's probably the stupidest cover I've seen in the series. Sure, they had covers back then that weren't related to the actual story, but this one's just ridiculous. We see Sonic in Robotropolis Motor Speedway winning a race, and this has nothing to do with any of the stories in this issue. What's up with that? Either they're running out of ideas, or blame it on contenders. In the first story, This Island Hedgehog, Sonic and Tails are riding in the tornado looking for Robotnik, only to find a floating island. As they fly towards it, they get hit by the unwelcome mat, yeah, literally, there's a rocket holding a unwelcome mat, and crash to the ground but manage to survive. They encounter an assaulting batter blimp throwing bombs and spewing out fire, and one of them hits Sonic, but he somehow manages to survive after being covered by some type of force field. How he was able to do that, I'll never know. So they dive into a pool only to end up in the hydrocity zone, where the narrator tells the readers to help Sonic and Tails steer through the zone by pushing the buttons on a Sega Genesis. Yeah, have a Sega Genesis controller and start pushing random buttons, otherwise you're screwed. Well, either way it doesn't work, as Sonic and Tails blank out for a few minutes, and end up in a dark room tied up. In there, they meet Knuckles the Echidna, guardian of the floating island, and doesn't take kindly to trespassers. We then pan out to see Robotnik and Snively, watching as Robotnik tricked Knuckles into thinking he's a freedom fighter, and Sonic and Tails are thieves. So Knuckles gives Sonic and Tails 10 minutes to get out before he comes after them, and so they do just that. Robotnik is pissed off about Knuckles' stupid actions, but soon gets over it when Crabmeat comes in with a Chaos Emerald that keeps the island floating. Knuckles sees them running near the shrine of the Chaos Emerald and heads over there through a secret passage only to find out that it's been stolen and that Robotnik tricked him all along. Meanwhile, we see Robotnik boarding a getaway hovercraft now that he has the Chaos Emerald in the palm of his hand. Then again, maybe not. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles soon trash the place and escape with the Emerald. Since the hovercraft uses the Emerald as fuel, it manages to get away, but very slowly and jittery. So the Emerald is safe again, Knuckles helps them find the pieces of the tornado, Sonic puts them back together, and they head off back to Knothole, as Knuckles has a feeling that this isn't the last time he'll be seeing Sonic the Hedgehog. In the second story, Space in Your Face, Sonic is constructing a statue of Antoine until Sally rushes in telling them that Robotnik has built a spaceship called RoboStorm, which can fire off a cannon to roboticize creatures within 100 yards, and cause your TV sets to show only infomercials. Dun dun dun! So the Freedom Fighters head over to Robotropolis to see a giant spaceship that looks like Robotnik. He sure loves putting his face on stuff. So they begin their plan to destroy the ship. First, they get rid of the SWAT bots. Second, dismantle the whole thing. And 3, escape before Robotnik arrives to launch. Well, so much for 3, cause here comes Robotnik and Snively and notice the Freedom Fighters are inside. They try to catch Sonic and the others, but they manage to escape by launching the pod into space. While they try to get back to Knothole and continue dismantling it, Robotnik catches up with them with another space pod and shoots a laser to drain all their fuel. But he lets Snively do it since he can't stand seeing himself shoot an image of himself. Wuss. But not all hope is lost, as the Freedom Fighters find out they have an emergency fuel deposit, so they use it as a short amount of fuel to escape Robotnik and land on one of the moons in space. Unfortunately, they don't have any landing gear, and so they crash right into the moon. Splat into the moon. And it turns out they've crash-landed into the legendary moon known as Muckery, a moon made out of mush. But then Robotnik catches up and transforms the ship into a giant robot. Why he never bothered giving it arms, I'll never know. But anyway, he gives it a good kick to kill the Freedom Fighters, only to find out that they've escaped, and so the chase continues. Meanwhile, things aren't looking good for the Freedom Fighters, as they continue walking through the mush with very little air to breathe in, and they see Robotnik hot on their tail. Using some quick thinking, Sonic uses his spin to form the mush into a giant statue of Robotnik, which distracts Robotnik since he enjoys marveling himself, and soon finds out the statue falls right on him, being covered in a pile of thick mush. And with that, the Freedom Fighters escape by using Robotnik's second spaceship to head back to Knothole. Soon it's the next day, and Rotor cooks up a nice batch of some nice, hot mush. Yeah, I think I'd rather go with takeout. So that's issue 13. The first story features some elements of Sonic 3 with some of the level designs and the floating islands, and the introduction of Knuckles into the Archie Sonic Universe, which is pretty cool, being a hot-headed, gullible echidna who protects the island from intruders, like in the Sonic games he was back then. The only difference is that Knuckles' job protecting the Master Emerald in the games would be abandoned pretty quickly and just have him show up and help Sonic for no reason. While in the comics, he continues his job protecting the island. The character would soon become a recurring character throughout the issues, and if he's needed somewhere else, he calls in a loyal friend to watch over the island while he's away. But the one thing that mystifies me is that the floating island is powered by a single Chaos Emerald instead of the Master Emerald, and the Master Emerald was introduced in Sonic and Knuckles, and this issue came out before the game was released. So either this was their version on how Floating Island works, maybe they didn't get full access to all the details on Sonic and Knuckles when it was being released, or blame it on contenders. The second story is an example of experimenting on exploring the outer space of Mobius. Sure, it starts off with a parody of Mercury, but later the ideas of planets and other strange universes would grow as the comics went on. It's also interesting that they said the Robo-Storm could roboticize anyone within 100 feet and so. Seems like this was a very early idea of what would happen in Sonic Genesis Part 4 and issue 230. And of course, the artwork is still provided by both Dave Manick's cartoony style and Art Mawhinney's own style, and they're still good to look at. Now let's move on to issue 14, that was released in June of 1994. We see Tails graffiti his name onto the cover of the comic, and notices Sonic handing him a bucket of water in disgust. The artwork on this cover is much better because there actually is a story that features Tails, and that is the first story, Tails Taste the Power. We see Sonic being attacked by some Little Shop of Horrors reject as Tails comes in to save him, but it turns out it was just a passion flower that grabbed Sonic while he was watering them. So Sonic asks Tails to take over for him, and that gets him excited, him leading a group of freedom fighters for the first time. But it turns out he only asked him to look after Rotor's greenhouse. Oh well. So later on, Rotor and Sonic come back to see how Tails is doing, only to find giant trees and bushes, and Tails talking in some scientific text that says about as confusing as an episode of Star Trek. It turns out that while Tails was working in the greenhouse, he got hungry and ate the only piece of fruit off of the Mobian Tree of Wisdom. Anyone who eats it will become super intelligent. So after this explanation, Antoine runs in telling him that Robotnik's Shredbot is coming in to capture them and destroy Knothole. So Sonic runs into action. Tails flies into action to defeat him, and surprisingly, he manages to trash the whole thing. With Tails' new intelligence, he becomes overconfident of himself, like building a cleaning robot and wanting to become the leader of the freedom fighters. Sally tries to tell him there's more to becoming a leader than just brains, but Tails brushes it off and goes off to defeat Robotnik now that he's really lost it. So Robotnik notices Tails is coming until they notice he's already here. But then the fruit's powers of intelligence start to wear off, and Tails is no longer intelligent, which gives Robotnik the opportunity to catch him pretty easily. Meanwhile, Rotor already knows that the fruit has already worn off, while Sonic is looking through a dictionary for subduing the prime nemesis that Tails talked about doing before going off to fight Robotnik. And Sonic calls himself a leader, and even though he doesn't know what nemesis means. But anyway, he finds out what it means, rushes over to Robotropolis, and sees Tails captured by Robotnik. Using his quick thinking, he explains that the badge he's wearing is a bomb and plans to blow up the place. So that makes Tails a suicide bomber. No comment. Robotnik doesn't believe it, even though Snively scans it and gets no readings, so Sonic threatens to activate it, but Robotnik stops him, frees Tails, and chickens out. So the day is saved once again, and now Tails has to sit through Antoine's lectures. And again, maybe not. In the second story, Girls Just Wanna Have Fun, we see Robotnik playing with some action figures, even though they look more like puppets. Well, at least he wasn't playing with ponies, otherwise, yeah. So while he's toying around with these toys, they gave him an idea. He knows most about the freedom fighters and thinks that Sally and Bunny are the weakest because they're girls, and creates a plan. Meanwhile, Sally and Bunny surprisingly find a mall in the middle of the forest and head on in to see what's going on, since they haven't seen a mall in a long time after Robotnik came by. But it turns out it was all a trap, as they fall through a trapdoor and end up being captured by some SWAT bots. So while Robotnik is waiting for Sonic and the others to come in so he can capture them all, He teases Bunny and Sally being weak and helpless, like some random princess always being saved by an Italian plumber. But then Sally and Bunny break free and start beating the crap out of all the SWAT bots, with Bunny's robotic parts and Sally's skilled moves. And so Robotnik is defeated, and they also decide to fix up the toys so that they have more better things to say. In short, don't mess with the power of girl power. So that's issue 14. The first story is probably the first time we see Tails in action more instead of being part of the team. This is probably the first time we see Tails being intelligent, and this would soon foreshadow of how smart Tails would become in the future. But of course Sonic comes in to save him at the last minute, and it's pretty funny how he defeats Robotnik by simply bluffing the whole bomb thing. The second story gives the female lead characters more of their own story. Back then, we really don't see Bunny and Sally in action that much, so in this story, it shows that they are capable of protecting themselves from Robotnik and his baddies. This time, Art Mawini covers the artwork for this issue, instead of switching back and forth with Dave. So with introducing Knuckles and more action from the other freedom fighters, these issues are pretty good and fun to read. Well, that wraps up this Archie Sonic review, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.